Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me today. Today we've got a bunch new Foundation spoilers that were spoiled over the weekend and today. So we've got new combos, new synergies, all coming to standard and older formats. Let's jump right into it with our first card, Exemplar of Light, which is a 4-mana angel creature, 3/3 with flying. And this is whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And whenever you put one or more +1/+1 counters on this creature, draw a card. And this ability triggers only once each turn. So this could be your turn or your opponent's turn, the way that this is worded, that you could draw that card. So something to note, this card seems pretty sweet to me. A really nice, like a life gain card draw engine with cards like Case of the Uneaten Feast, which lets you gain life whenever a creature comes into play. So if you had that on turn 1 and this on turn 4, for example, a trigger right away, you gain a life, put a counter on it, draw a card. So that's pretty good. If you have cards like Elias Ilkor, kind of do the same thing. Redundancy gives you some more life gain, but anytime a creature would come into play, when you have this out, it would buff the creature +1/+1 and draw you a card. Now, the ability, the third line text here is interesting worded because you don't actually have to gain life necessarily to draw a card. So if anything else just puts a +1/+1 counter on it, that will let you draw a card. And also, if you had like an instant way to put a +1/+1 counter or an instant way to gain a life, you could trigger this twice per turn cycle. I was just thinking about Snakeskin Veil might be a nice way to both protect this card on your opponent's turn if they tried to kill it with the sorcery speed removal, something like that. You cast the Snakeskin Veil, protect it, put the counter on it, and then draw a card, uh, even if you've already drawn a card during your turn. So it's got some really cool potential. I think this card's quite strong overall. Really good in life gain decks, but also could be good in +1/+1 counter decks as well. Okay, next up we've got Kaikar, who brings the Wind, a 4-mana 3/4 bird wizard legend with flying. And it says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you choose one. You can exile another target creature you control and return to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of next end step. So kind of blinking your own stuff if you need to do that. Or create a 1/1 white spirit token with flying. So not bad. On its own, it's not the best rate. But it can work with some sort of like I was thinking like Manifest Dread kind of would be kind of sweet with this because um, most of those cards that Manifest Dread are non-creature spells, so it would trigger it. And then its ability to blink stuff is really good with Manifest Dread because you want to obviously put like a better creature underneath your Manifest Dread and then blink it and have that creature come into play. So it kind of fits really well into that strategy because it kind of works on both sides of the spells that Manifest Dread trigger it, and then the things that are under it, you want it to trigger to blink. And if there's nothing good to blink, also you can just make a spirit token. So not bad. Kind of interesting. It also kind of works with a lot of like the Atali's Favor decks that I always build on this channel. If you haven't seen any of those, go ahead, look back through the history on the channel. But there's a bunch of different interesting combos that you can do with Atali's Favor into Atali's Favor, into more Atali's Favors, into cards that blink Atali's Favor. Could be useful. In this case, it would only kind of give you a bunch of spirit tokens with flying, which isn't bad. That could certainly be a game-winning play, but it also could blink some of your other creatures in play. So maybe you kind of, with prototype creatures, that could be kind of interesting if you kind of set your deck up like that. Or some other things that you actually kind of like want to blink. So I don't know. It's an interesting card for sure. It doesn't seem extremely strong. It is a bird, it's a wizard too, which could matter for those synergies. There are some bird and wizard synergies as well. But those are kind of what I was thinking of where it might see play. I kind of like it in Manifest Dread strategies. That kind of seems like the coolest kind of card to play in that kind of strategy. Okay, next up we've got the Valkyries Call, which is a 5-mana enchantment. Whenever a non-token, non-angel creature you control dies, return the card to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. That's flying as an angel in addition to its other types. So basically, when anything is not an angel that dies, it comes back as an angel, a bigger creature with flying. So it's kind of cool. This is certainly potential for like I don't know, just value cards that die, creatures with come into play abilities that die that come back and then get the ability again. That could be kind of sweet. The problem is it kind of is bound by this says it's a non-angel creature and then turns it into an angel. So you can't continually sacrifice the creature over and over again. However, If you have a creature that has like persist, you could do this because the creature with persist, you can, I believe you can kind of choose which of the two you want it to come back as, either the angel or the persist with the -1/-1 counter on it. And then if it comes back as the angel, if you have a sacrifice outlet, you could sacrifice it again, and then it could come back with a persist counter on it, and then you can sacrifice it. It wouldn't be an angel anymore, I believe, and then you can sacrifice this again, and then it would be an angel, and you can kind of go back and forth. This could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works from what someone told me. This this would be an infinite combo with Alter Dementia. You can continually sacrifice the future goblin or any creature with persist and sacrifice outlet. There's other cards that do this, but this one is kind of does give you a lot of just like value on its own in theory. So maybe it's worth it to kind of try to go for that combo. But I think maybe it's decent enough just to kind of be a value card on its own. We'll see. There's some other creatures too that creatures that could like sacrifice themselves that could be good. I was thinking maybe even evoke creatures in older formats could be kind of interesting with this, to kind of have them come back. But it is 5 mana, so I don't know if that's quite good enough as well. But definitely an interesting card for sure. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this, if there's other kind of combos I'm missing with this. All right, we've got the Sphinx of Forgotten Lore, which is a 4-mana Sphinx with flash and flying, 3/3. And whenever it attacks, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback, and flashback cost equal to its mana cost. So this card is pretty cool, pretty sweet. You can kind of play it end step, and then get your value right away from it by flashing back a creature, to kind of get a 2-for-1 with it. So, some of the best cards in Standard right now are sorceries and instants, such as Duress, Go for the Throat, and a new card they're actually reprinting, Burst Lightning, which is just a better shock, or just playing shock. You can kind of get redundancy, so burn spells, discard spells, creature kill spells, all of those you can kind of rebuy with this thing, just to get more 2-for-1, basically 3-for-1 as the game goes on. So you could really play like Duress to protect it so they don't have a removal spell for it, and then kind of flash it back and continue to kind of remove your opponent's hand. So I think this card's pretty good. Snapcatcher the Mage with the effect every single turn when you attack with it. Because you can play, say, Go for the Throat or Burst Lightning to kill a blocker, so you can keep attacking with it. So it really kind of snowballs itself, and it can kind of sneakily kind of do it end of turn. So I think this has some potential to see some constructed play. Definitely a powerful ability. Just as a 4-mana 3/3 flash flying, it's not that great. So if they have like a removal spell up during your end step, then it's kind of not great. But I don't know. I kind of like it. The blue-black kind of tempo decks are already quite good, and this could potentially go in that deck, or maybe a different deck that's kind of built more with the spell slinger kind of feel into it, with like a prowess kind of deck as well. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this one as well. It's kind of an interesting, cool new effect that you got going here, that you can kind of continually snapcaster things every turn. All right, next up we've got Electro Duplicate. Yeah, that's how you pronounce that. It's a 3-mana sorcery, and create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it has haste, and at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice the token. And it has flashback for 4. So definitely an interesting card. The combos I'm thinking about with this, I mean, we already have like Molten Duplication, which is very similar to this. There is kind of a key difference, is that this gives the creature has haste instead of gaining it haste, so that can matter for some combos. But it also kind of gives redundancy to like Carnosaur combo. A few weeks ago I built another Carnosaur Molten Duplication combo deck. You can go back and check that out if you haven't seen that video already. But if you wanted to play 8 kind of effects of the Molten Duplication, that would be interesting, and kind of make sure that your Carnosaur is lethal. So just building your deck and such that it only discovers into this, basically, would be pretty strong. The flashback is interesting. It works with Geared as well, in some of the Geared combos I've built on this channel. For example, the Fear of Missing Out combo that I built on this channel, that would kind of work to give some more redundancy to that combo. So you could kind of go infinite that way. But you could also just play it as sort of a value card, maybe. I don't know if there's like a deck that would really want this just as a value card, but it works well with like Rotten Mouth Viper and things like that. But yeah, let me know if there's any combos with this. This is certainly a very combo-licious card, so to speak. Um, figuring out what the right target is. But these are kind of the two that I thought of immediately when I saw this card. And then having flashback is kind of cool. Maybe in like a, I don't know, a mill strategy or something could be useful just to kind of get some extra value and have this in your graveyard. And then you kind of use it to get extra value from your graveyard. So that is kind of my thoughts on Electro Duplicate. Next up, we've got Ashroot Animist, which is a 4-mana 4/4, a lizard druid trample. It says when this creature attacks, another target creature you control gains trample, gets +X/+X. X is this creature's power. So I actually think this card is pretty strong. On the surface value, it doesn't look like much. It's sort of like a 4-mana 4/4 trample, but its ability that when it attacks, it basically is a 4-mana 8/8. I mean, if you have another creature on its own, just by itself, it's attacking and adding 8 power um, to the battlefield, basically. But it kind of is the problem with the card of, you play it and then it just dies to removal, and it doesn't really impact the board that much. Um, so you really want to kind of find ways to give it haste. The best I could find in standard that might be pretty sweet with it would be Cunning Coyote. Because if you plotted the Coyote on 2, or even with Land War Elves, you could do this on turn 3. Play the Coyote, or plot the Coyote on 2, play this on 4, and then play the Coyote, give it haste, and then attack. It would be a 5/5 at that point, and then you could pump the Coyote or any other creature you had out as well. Give it +5/+5 as well. So that's an attack for 12, right? Just between those two cards, which is pretty powerful with trample, both having trample. So being able to give it haste is quite good. You can copy it again with Electro Duplicate, just as I was just talking about, would be pretty cool. Because 2 of these is 16 trample damage if they pump each other. They're both 8/8 tramples. So definitely strong card to copy if you can. And then, it's also a lizard, which is interesting, with sort of the other lizard synergies that we have already going. The best one I could think of was the Rockface Village, because it's just a land that you can use to cast it, but then later in the game it can pump its power, which definitely matters, and give it haste, which certainly matters with this card. So maybe there's something there. I don't know. This card seems strong to me if you kind of build your deck in the right way to use it. So 4 mana for 8 trample power just on the surface is quite good. But yeah, I certainly wanted to try to give it haste, I think is the key here. All right, next up we've got the Scrawling Crawler, which is a 3 mana Phyrexian construct artifact. At the beginning, artifact creature, which is a 3/2. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player loses 1 life. So we kind of have a card draw hate tribal now in standard. If you wanted to build this deck, we're just 4 Razorkin Needlehead, 4 Scrawling Crawler, and 4 Shellys here. Just so every time your opponent draws cards, they really are gonna feel the pain. Um, so yeah, I could do that. I might do that. Sounds kind of fun. This is kind of cool too because it also makes your opponent draw an extra card. So each sort of cycle with this, if you just have this itself, like you play this, you say go, they draw, they lose 1, and then during your upkeep they also lose 1. So it is pinging them quite a lot. And then because it's making them draw more, all your other effects that punish them for drawing more are doubled essentially too. So that could be a thing. There's a lot of other ways to like make your opponent draw cards with all these cards in the same deck. That could be kind of a cool, interesting strategy. I'm not sure how good it is because I'm just thinking like it is 3 mana for 3/2, and when it comes to play, it doesn't do anything on its own necessarily. It does if you pass the turn, it would potentially ping your opponent, but if they have like a shock up or any sort of cut down, and does die to cut down as well, they can just like kill it before you get any extra cards out of it or it does any damage. So it does die to a lot of removal spells, unfortunately. So that is kind of the downside of it, but definitely a fun, interesting card. All right, next up we've got the Lunar Insight, which is a 3-mana blue sorcery. Draw a card for each different mana value among non-land permanents you control. So at first when I read this, I was like, it's not that good. Like, how could this possibly be good? Like, how many cards do you really need to draw off this? I think if you draw 3 cards off of it, you're pretty happy. If you draw any more, you're quite happy. Um, but you know, card draw, discard the just draw cards is not that great in standard. But it could be decent if you are able to get quite a lot of value out of it. And I was thinking, well, maybe in modern affinity decks, because affinity decks really have a whole slew of different mana costs. 0 mana with the Ornithopter, Springleaf Drums, Frogmite Enforcers. You can prototype for 4 mana or 7 mana. Would be to vary your costs. There's various 3 mana spells in that deck as well. So maybe in that you could kind of like play this to draw like 4 or 5 cards if you had the board to do it. But it does kind of spew its hand out pretty quickly typically. The deck isn't great in modern anymore, but used to be good. So maybe that's the one. What came to my mind first when I look at this card. The other thing I realized too is that it's pretty good with tokens, because the token, I believe, has a mana cost of 0, a mana value of 0. So if you played like Spyglass Siren on one, and you got your map token, and you played a 2-drop, and then you played this on turn 3, you draw 3 cards, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not bad. Drawing 3 cards for 3 mana is pretty decent. So maybe this card is good. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like modern Magic, just like cards that just draw cards, are not that great anymore. They used to be, maybe, with there's like that enchantment that pumps your creatures for drawing cards. So maybe that is useful with this. But what is that card called? Let me know in the comments below. It's okay. Anyways, I can't think of it. It was a blue enchantment, but that could be kind of cool with this as well. Maybe that would go into that sort of deck. But the fact that it does work with like little tokens makes it decent. I mean, at the downside of this card is, like, if you have nothing on your board, it draws you no cards. So that's pretty bad. But certainly could draw quite a few cards. All right, next up we've got the High Fae Trickster, which is a 4-mana fairy wizard, 4/2 with flash and flying, and it says you can cast spells as though they had flash. So pretty cool, interesting card. Really awesome art here. And fairies was sort of a supported tribe in standard for some time. It has some decent cards. It never really took off or was that high tier of a deck in standard, but this could go in a fairy deck for sure, or just like a flash deck, a control deck that you're wanting to kind of play this on end step and have a clock. It only has 2 toughness, so it doesn't, again, die to like shock effects or a lot of removal. But there are, I was thinking, okay, what are the combos or interesting synergies with this? There are some cards that are quite better if you can cast them with flash. One of them being Split Up, which was recently in the last set here, because if you can cast Split Up with flash, or as an instant, basically, you can really choose the modes quite strategically. You can attack with all your creatures, and then use the mode to kill all untapped, destroy all untapped creatures. Or you can, when your opponent attacks you with all their creatures, you can play this at instant speed and destroy all their tapped creatures. So Split Up is kind of sweet if you can cast it at instant speed. my pet card, Colossification, of course, also pretty sweet if you can cast it at instant speed, because you can do it mid-combat. So those are the 2 cards that I thought about with High Fae Trickster to kind of use that ability. I don't know if there's other things. I mean, obviously, just like being able to cast board wipes or other sorceries at instant speed can be kind of cool, but I don't know if they're necessarily. I was just trying to think if there's any cards that are like really, really improved. These are the 2 that I thought get quite better if you can cast them at instant speed. But let me know in the comments below if there's any kind of cool synergies with this guy I'm missing. All right, next up we've got the Consuming Aberration. This one is, I believe this is a reprint. It is a 5 mana star, and its power and toughness is equal to the number of cards in your opponent's graveyards. And whenever you cast a spell, each opponent reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal land. Put those cards into their graveyard. So it's pretty good against like Oops All Spells decks, right? In older formats, if you get that last ability, it just mills them out. They have no lands in their deck, but um, can be quite huge if you're playing a mill deck that you're trying to mill your opponent out with. For example, I think Jace is probably the best card we have in our current standard metagame, but there's quite a few blue-black cards. There's even that the land that mills your opponent out. We also have the new Mind Skitter, which is pretty good. 10 mills them for 10 every turn. So this could become quite big pretty quickly, for sure. And then I don't know, you just use it to win the game, or you fling it, or something like that. Could be fun. I don't know if this is a high tier card or potential, but definitely some fun, janky, standard stuff going along with this. The last ability, it's like, how much are you really going to mill each time that gets triggered? I don't really know. Maybe 1 or 2 cards on average, probably, right? Until they hit a land. So that's not great, but it does help. So kind of just like a huge threat in a mill deck as well, and not a legend, so you could like copy this or do something like that as well. But yeah, let me know what the consuming aberration, if you guys have any thoughts about that one as well. All right. Next up, we've got a few cards which I think they are really cool, but I don't really think they're that good or good enough necessarily to see play in standard. The Homunculus Horde is a new one, which is very cool, very cute little guy. There's one and then a million little eyes in the background. I love the art here. So he's a 4 mana 2/2 Homunculus, and it says whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a token that's a copy of it. So it certainly can kind of spiral out of control, but it doesn't you can't really you can only trigger this once a turn basically because it's only the second card. So you can't really spiral out of control with this like Storm Splitter you can do, but it certainly does over time eventually make a bunch of these guys, which is pretty cool. So you could create a huge board if you play this, and then you play like a 1 mana cantrip that draws you a card. Now you have 2, and then on your next turn, or even on your opponent's turn, if you can draw 2 cards, then you can make copies of each of those 2, right? Or on your turn, then if you draw your second card on your turn, then you can make 2 more copies, because each one is going to trigger again, and then the next turn you could make 8, and then the next turn you could have 16. So definitely could make a lot over time, but just a 4 mana 2/2 that doesn't really nothing. If you just play this on its own, I just don't think that's good enough for standard. We got the Muldrotha, the Gravetide, which is a 6 mana 6/6, a legendary creature elemental avatar, and it says during each of your turns you may play a land and cast a permanent spell of each permanent type from your graveyard. This one I do think is kind of powerful and good, and could maybe see some play in standard because the ability is powerful. The body is pretty big. But again, it's like if you just tap out for this on turn 6, you're not really gonna get any value, and it just dies. You're not getting any value out of it as a 6 mana 6/6. So I don't know. That's not great. But if you do get to untap with it, then you can kind of cast a bunch of things from your graveyard. That's pretty sweet. So I don't know. Maybe like as a one of and a soul tie deck, it could be uh, potentially good. But I couldn't think of anything that's like really good besides like Mindslaver in older formats. That's kind of sweet with this because you can just cast that over and over again from your graveyard. Um, but if they ever print like another way to like take an extra turn that's a permanent that you can kind of recast every turn, that would be kind of a combo with this for sure. Um, but yeah, definitely an interesting and cool card. All right, let's go to some reprints. We got the Doubling Season, which every combo player's favorite card. This is certainly janky usually because it is a 5 mana, very expensive enchantment. But if you don't know what this does, it says if effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many. And then if effect would put 1 or more counters on a permanent you control, it puts twice that many counters. So it does let you ultimate a lot of planeswalkers, kind of like the green talent does as well. It doesn't work with Rask in the sense it doesn't double the poison counters, so it doesn't quite work with that. But it is pretty sweet with the new Ajani, because it lets you ultimate right away, and then it also doubles the number of cats that you get with the Johnny because it doubles the tokens. Um, yeah, twice that many tokens, right? So that could potentially be a game-winning play with those two. The tokens don't have haste or anything, but so you'd have to kind of dodge a board swipe, board a sweeper potentially. But yeah, it could be a combo. Also, there are some infinite combo shenanigans in a lot of formats, but in standard with Doppelgang and Three Blind Mice. So if you create just with Doppelgang by itself, or any ways to create token copies of Doubling Season itself, kind of gets out of hand. You can reach the token limit on Arena if you really want to with Doppelgang here, because if you create a token copy of itself, it's going to create 2 additional Doubling Seasons, I believe. And then when you create any token copy, it's going to just like 8 times that token, I believe, or 8 times the counters on things. So with Three Blind Mice here, if you create a token copy of the Three Blind Mice and you have Doubling Season out, it's going to get 2 counters on it because of the lore counters are going to go up to 2. Then you can use it to create a copy of itself, the Three Blind Mice token, which is then going to create another uh, 3 blind mice, which is going to give you another token, which is going to a 1/1 mouse token, which is going to double, and also going to let you create a token copy of another token of the 3 blind mice. So it goes infinite basically with these 3 cards. You get infinite mice, you get infinite 3 blind mice sagas until you target something else to stop the loop. But that is certainly going to break Arena if you do that. So if you want to do that, have fun. I might try it myself as well. But certainly an interesting, cool card, and certainly something to keep an eye on for anything that creates tokens, anything that makes counters, things like that. This could potentially be quite good. Maybe there's some other card that I'm missing that could be really good with this as well. But there's that cat that has 8 tokens that you could double the counters on that. That could be interesting. But yeah, let me know any combos with this that you think of. All right, Itali Primal Storm is next. It is a 6-mana Elder Dragon legend, and since when it attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. You can cast the spell without paying its mana cost. So you really want to get the attack trigger on this, which could be interesting if you're like reanimating it like with Lazav or Suvin Drifter if it's on top of your deck. It also wants you to control the top of your deck, so you can cast whatever you want from your deck with Insatiable Avarice. So maybe that's a way to use this. It is a dinosaur, which there are some support for dinosaurs as well. So maybe that is good enough. I'm not sure if this is good enough. It seems a little bit of a janky card. It is. Never really sees play in any older formats, as far as I'm aware of. So maybe not, but I probably will try it in some deck at some point. So that's why it's here. Next up, we've got Zombify. So we've got some lower rarity cards now. Zombify used to be quite a good card back in the day. This is an interesting that they're printing this in Foundations as just this unconditional 4-mana return any creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. We're not really used to getting that. We got Rite of the Moth recently in the last set, which restricts you to playing white. It does have flashback, but it also puts like a finality counter on the creature, I believe. So this is pretty good card, pretty good rate anyways for this effect, which we just don't really get anymore. Haven't gotten in standard for quite a while. I think there's another one, the Sheldred's Restoration, which returns it, but then you lose life equal to its mana value, I believe. So that's again not great, but this is certainly setting the standard for reanimation. So what do we want to reanimate? Valgavoth is pretty sweet, the new one. I think Atraxa again is just like the best, probably overall. But we also got a new Coma World Eater, which is a 7-mana 8/12. It can't be countered. It has Trample and Ward 4, so that's pretty sweet because it can't really pretty hard to remove, especially on turn 4 if you're zombifying it back. And when it deals combat damage to a player, you create 4 3/3 blue serpent creature tokens. So definitely a cool one to reanimate. Maybe other ways to use this new Coma, which is certainly a new cool card to think about as well as in combination with Zombify. So maybe there's some other good Zombify targets. These seem like maybe the best for now. But yeah, definitely exciting to have this in standard. With Llanowar Elves, you could potentially reanimate something on turn 3. So yeah, definitely a cool new addition to reanimation strategies. Okay, a new card here, Inspiration from Beyond, which is a 3-mana sorcery, mill 3 cards, return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand, flashback for 7. So pretty good in self-mill strategies, I would say, for like the Abuelo's Awakening combos. This would be pretty sweet because it gets the card you want to return from Abuelo's, and it could return Abuelo's itself to your hand. Could set that up. The Helping Hand Oculus decks maybe would want this. I'm not sure, but it could return a Helping Hand back to your hand, and then you could use that. It could mill an Oculus, and then you can just get it back for 1 mana, something like that. Also, if you have 2 of these, they can kind of chain into each other over and over again. So the Valley Flood Color decks maybe would want this as a way to just kind of go infinite essentially. So if you kind of have the mana, if you have the green glimmer out and enough otters or birds or frogs to tap them for 3 mana, then you could cast this, mill 3, return another copy of it, and then cast that copy, return this again, just loop that infinitely over and over again. So definitely an interesting card for sure, because it doesn't like exile it when you cast it. So you'd mill your whole deck, but if you could win that same turn, it wouldn't matter. It has flashback, which is pretty sweet too. So I don't know. This card seems strong potentially in the right deck. It doesn't affect the board and it is 3 mana, so maybe it's a little too slow. But I think it's got some interesting, cool kind of combo help potential. Okay, next up we got Bulk Up, which is a 2 mana instant, double target creature's power until end of turn with flashback for 6. Not sure if you're ever gonna really want to flashback this or be able to in like red aggressive decks, but it doesn't hurt that it has it. It's kind of cool with a red ley line, right? Because if you double, it's like 4 times the power. If you have like 2 ley lines in your opener and you cast this, then it like double, I think. 8 times the power of the creature. So this card is cool because it is different than like double strike. I mean, it's similar in a lot of scenarios, but sometimes it really matters that you want to increase the power of the creature. For example, with Burn Together, which is a well played card in standard. Bulking up and then flinging it is definitely different than giving a double strike. So that could matter in some situations. There's other cards that kind of want you to have high power on your card. So Bulk Up could work in that regard as well. An interesting card. It is very similar to another. I can't remember what the card is, but there's a red 2 mana red instant that does the same thing in Pioneer, but doesn't really see that much play. So I don't know if this will, but it's cool, really cool art, and a powerful-ish effect potentially. So something to kind of keep an eye on with other stuff as well. Oh yeah, Gigantosaurus. That's another cool card that I was thinking about with this. So yeah, if you double that power, it's 20, and then you fling it with Callous Sellsword. There's your jank combo. If you want another one. All right. Fairy synergies with Feybloom Trick. Okay, 3 mana for an instant. Create 2 1/1 blue fairy creature tokens with flying, and then if you do, you tap target creature and opponent control. So this card's pretty strong, kind of on its own, just kind of maybe buying you a turn and making 2 fairy tokens. There are some fairy synergies in standard, like I mentioned earlier. Talion's Messenger can work with fairies. Spell Stutter is kind of sweet with this because it gets pumped for each fairy you control, and this gives you 2 fairy tokens. Maybe fairies in older formats would want this. Not sure, but it's certainly an interesting card. And maybe just like in a tempo deck could be good enough. It commits a crime too. I was thinking about that. Like maybe that's useful in crime decks. But that's kind of what I was thinking. Mostly the potential of seeing maybe a fairies deck kind of come back with this. And then last up, we've got Cat Tribal Cat Collector, a 3 mana 3/2 human citizen. And it says when it enters, you create a food, and when you ever gain life for the first time, you create a 1/1 rat. Oh, sorry, cat, not a rat. So with Arbo, the first thing, works nicely with the cat tokens, and also just kind of like the life gain strategy I mentioned earlier could be pretty sweet with this. You play this and then gain a life right away. It only can trigger once uh, during your turn, each of your turns, it says. So you can't really go too ham with these cat tokens. But if you were able to make a cat token every single turn, that would be pretty decent card as well. So I think something to kind of keep an eye on, something that makes a lot of tokens over time is always quite good. So the food itself going to gain you life. So maybe it fits in a food strategy as well. But that's kind of my thoughts on the cat collector. So there are the new cards, the new combos, the new synergies. Again, just let me know what you're thinking in the comments. Appreciate all the likes and comments and subscribes from these videos. I put a lot of effort into making these spoiler videos, thinking of different things as soon as I can, trying to get these out as soon as the cards are sort of spoiled. So I hope you enjoy them. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What decks are you going to build? Any cool combos that you can think of with the new cards? I'd love to hear from you. All right, thanks so much. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video, probably a spoiler video for the next Foundations.